Okay, so you're scrolling late at night and you land on a listing, a private island, a few acres, turquoise water, palm trees for $600,000. That's less than a house in most major cities. And somewhere in the back of your mind you think, I could actually do this. I could just buy an island. You picture the beach, the silence, nobody else's music, nobody else's rules. You do that math quickly enough, and owning a piece of paradise suddenly feels within reach for anyone with a decent down payment. But here's the thing. Nobody shows you what happens after you click buy. The listing price is not the price. It's the entry fee. And what comes after it is closer to running a small, independent utility company in the middle of the ocean, with no one to call when something breaks. To understand what owning a private island actually costs and who actually profits from it, we need to follow the money, starting with that number on the listing page. Private island prices span an enormous range. On the low end, you can find titled freehold islands in Nicaragua, Panama, and parts of the South Pacific for well under $100,000. Tiny plots of a quarter acre to a few acres, completely undeveloped. In Canada and Scandinavia, small lake and archipelago islands regularly list under $500,000. At the other extreme, the Bahamas and Florida remain the most expensive markets on Earth for private islands, with listings running as high as $75 million, driven by proximity to major airports, established infrastructure, and decades of celebrity ownership, turning certain archipelagos into status symbols. In between sits most of the actual market, islands in the Caribbean, the Seychelles, French Polynesia, Fiji, Greece and Croatia, typically priced from a few $100,000 up into the tens of millions, depending on size, accessibility and how much has already been built. But the sticker price is genuinely just the beginning. Industry professionals who track this market describe something informally known as the 1.8x rule. For an undeveloped island, the total cost of actually making it livable, including closing costs, solar power, a desalination system, a dock, a modest home and a septic system, runs on average about 1.8 times the original listing price. A $2 million island, in other words, tends to cost roughly $3.6 million by the time you can actually sleep there. Break that build-out down, and you start to see where the money goes. A basic solar and battery power system, since almost no private island is connected to a mainland electrical grid, runs anywhere from $50,000 to $200,000, plus a diesel generator as backup. A desalination unit to convert seawater into drinking water costs $30,000 to $100,000 to install, and up to $15,000 a year just to run and maintain, because the filters and pumps take constant abuse from salt air. A functional dock, essential since boats are usually the only way in or out, runs $75,000 or more, and needs regular repair to survive corrosion and storms. And because virtually every building material, from lumber to concrete to appliances, has to be shipped in by boat, construction costs on an island typically run 2 to 3 times what the same build would cost on the mainland. You are not just buying land, you are buying the right to build your own miniature power grid, water plant and port from scratch, in one of the most expensive construction environments in the world. Now here's the part almost nobody budgets for correctly, what it costs to keep the island running every single year after that. This is where a private island stops behaving like a house and starts behaving like a small business with exactly one extremely demanding customer. Annual operating costs for a developed private island typically range from $84,000 to over $300,000 a year. Property taxes alone can run $5,000 to $50,000 depending on jurisdiction and assessed value. Insurance is the biggest single variable, and in hurricane belt regions like the Caribbean, property insurance runs 2 to 4% of the insured value every single year, meaning a $3 million property can cost $60,000 to $120,000 annually just to keep covered. And some insurers won't write a policy on an isolated island at all, leaving owners to self-insure against total loss. Fuel for generators and boats can run $25,000 to $50,000 a year. Boat and dock maintenance adds another $20,000 to $40,000. And most insurers effectively require a full-time or part-time caretaker on site, because in a tropical climate, an unoccupied structure gets reclaimed by vegetation and humidity astonishingly fast. Budget $60,000 to $100,000 a year for a full-time caretaker once salary, housing, and related costs are included, or somewhat less for a part-time local arrangement. Add it up, and a modest, developed Caribbean island can easily cost $150,000 to $250,000 a year to simply maintain, before you've spent a single night there. Think about what that actually means. A typical vacation home sits empty and costs you almost nothing while you're away, maybe a property tax bill and a landscaper. A private island sits empty and still needs fuel, still needs a caretaker checking the desalination filters, still needs someone watching the weather forecast for the next tropical system. It doesn't have neighbours to notice if the roof is failing. It has you and whoever you're paying to notice for you. Here's something that seems counterintuitive, the same way it seems counterintuitive that a $6 latte is mostly rent and payroll rather than coffee. The reason islands in places like Greece, Croatia, Scotland, and the US Northeast run 40 to 60% cheaper to operate than equivalent Caribbean or Pacific properties isn't really about the land. It's about what you don't have to build. A Mediterranean island connected to a mainland power grid doesn't need a $150,000 solar array or a diesel backup generator. A property outside the hurricane belt doesn't need 2-4% insurance premiums or a storm damage reserve fund. Owners in the know will actually trade a warmer climate and postcard blue water for a temperate island with grid power and mild weather, because the operating math is dramatically friendlier, even if the Instagram photos are less impressive. Now let's talk about location strategy. Because just like a Starbucks site selection team mapping drive times, serious island buyers are running a formula, not chasing a feeling. The first variable is accessibility. How close is the nearest airport? And is the island reachable by a short boat ride, or does it require a seaplane charter every single trip? The second is natural resources. Does the island have any source of fresh water at all, usable soil, or is literally everything, water included, going to need to be manufactured or shipped in? The third is legal jurisdiction, and this one trips up more buyers than any other. Foreign ownership of islands is not a given anywhere. Many countries require a specific permit, commonly called an alien landholding license in the Caribbean, that can cost 5 to 10% of the purchase price on top of the sale itself. Some jurisdictions won't grant foreigners freehold title at all, forcing buyers into long-term leasehold structures or ownership through a locally registered company instead of owning the dirt outright. A handful of Caribbean nations, including Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada and St. Kitts and Nevis, have turned this into an entire industry. Buy approved real estate starting around $200,000 to $300,000. And the purchase itself qualifies you for a second passport within 3 to 6 months. For a certain kind of buyer, the island isn't really the product. Citizenship is. Now, for the most brilliant thing a small number of island owners figured out, the thing that turns this from an expensive hobby into an actual asset, converting a private toy into a commercial operation. The single best-known example is Necker Island in the British Virgin Islands, purchased by Richard Branson in 1976 for a reported $120,000. Back when he was a 28-year-old airline founder with almost no money to spare. The deal came with a catch. The local government required him to build a resort on it within 4 years. Branson invested another $10 million over the following 3 years to actually make the island livable and rentable. Today, Necker Island can be booked as a full exclusive buyout, accommodating up to roughly 50 guests for anywhere from $100,000 to over $140,000 a night. And Branson also now rents individual rooms starting at a comparatively modest $5,400 a night, letting smaller groups experience the island without paying for the whole thing. A $120,000 land purchase and roughly $10 million of infrastructure investment turned into one of the most recognizable luxury hospitality brands on the planet. One that's hosted royalty, US presidents, and A-list celebrities for decades. That's the model. The island itself doesn't generate a return sitting there empty. The business built on top of it does. That pattern repeats at smaller scale across the market. Investors are increasingly buying modest islands specifically to run as boutique resorts, eco-lodges, or wedding and event venues, where a single well-marketed property can generate six-figure annual returns from vacation rentals alone, even without Necker Island's celebrity pedigree. Tony Robbins turned his personal retreat in Fiji, Namale, into a full commercial wellness resort. The common thread across every success story in this space is the same. None of them are passive. An island doesn't appreciate and throw off rental income the way a well-located apartment does. It requires someone actively running a hospitality operation, marketing it, staffing it, and absorbing the seasonal swings, or it just sits there as a very expensive liability with a view. Now, let's talk about what happens when things go wrong, because private islands fail in ways ordinary real estate rarely does. Start with the climate risk, which is not hypothetical, it's structural. A single hurricane can cause $100,000 to $500,000 in damage to structures, docks, and landscaping in one night, and deductibles in hurricane zones typically run 2 to 5% of the insured value, meaning even a covered claim comes with a painful, out-of-pocket hit. Some insurers decline to write policies on isolated island properties at all, which means self-insuring against a total loss, essentially betting your own net worth that the next storm season is a mild one. Then there's liquidity risk, which catches almost every seller off guard. The buyer pool for a private island is minuscule compared to the buyer pool for a house or even a mainland luxury estate. Developed islands can sit on the market for years, not months, because the number of people simultaneously willing and able to run their own off-grid power and water systems is genuinely tiny. And then there's the daily practical risk that doesn't show up in any spreadsheet. What happens during a medical emergency when the nearest hospital is a boat ride and a flight away? Or what happens when the single boat you depend on for every supply run breaks down in the wrong week? So what does actually owning and running one look like financially, start to finish? Let's do the math on a realistic mid-tier example. Say you buy a Caribbean island listed at $1.2 million. Applying the 1.8x rule, expect roughly $2.1 million total once the home, solar system, desalination unit, and dock are functional. Property tax on that value runs around $8,000 to $9,000 a year. Hurricane and windstorm insurance adds $15,000 to $25,000 annually. A full-time caretaker, factoring salary and housing, runs $60,000 to $100,000. Fuel, boat maintenance and general upkeep add another $45,000 to $90,000. All in, you're looking at $130,000 to $225,000 a year in pure carrying costs, on top of the roughly $2. $1 million you already spent to get there, for a property that, unlike a rental apartment or a dividend stock, produces zero income unless you actively turn it into a hospitality business. Optimistic case, you rent it out for part of the year through a luxury vacation platform, build a reputation and offset a meaningful chunk of those carrying costs while the island itself appreciates, because undeveloped, titled coastline is a genuinely finite resource. Realistic case, a major storm damages the dock and roof in year 3. Insurance covers 70% of it after a hefty deductible. The caretaker you hired quits and takes months to replace, and you spend a strange amount of your net worth keeping a piece of land you visit 6 weeks a year fully operational. If all of this sounds like a lot for something you'll use a few weeks out of the year, you're not wrong. And the market has quietly built an entire off-ramp for exactly that realization. Renting instead of owning. You can stay on Necker Island itself, starting around $5,400 a night per room. You can book comparable luxury private island resorts across Fiji, the Seychelles and the Caribbean at similar rates without ever touching a desalination system or a hurricane insurance policy. For the price of 1 or 2 nights on someone else's island, you get the experience without the balance sheet, no property tax, no caretaker payroll, no 2 a.m. call about a generator failure. It's the same logic as buying a single cup of coffee instead of a coffee shop. You get the product without underwriting the infrastructure behind it. The biggest lesson from private island ownership isn't what the listing costs. It's what the listing doesn't tell you. A private island is not, in any meaningful sense, a real estate purchase the way a house or an apartment is. It's a decision to become your own power company, your own water utility, your own hospitality operator, and often your own insurance underwriter all at once, in exchange for a kind of privacy and exclusivity that genuinely can't be purchased any other way. For the handful of owners who treat it as a business, building a Necker Island or a Namale on top of the land, it can become one of the most distinctive assets a person can own. For everyone else, it's a very expensive, very isolated second home that happens to be surrounded by water instead of a fence. The island was never really the product. What you're actually buying is the absence of everyone else, and it turns out that's one of the most expensive things money can buy.